just because you call it a right, just because you really want something, that doesn't make it a right. These are actually two sides of the same child commodifying coin. So if the pinnacle of what you worship and what you value is adult sexual expression, children will be the necessary sacrifice for that. And so if we want women to become someone who cherishes their body, understands that sex, marriage, and babies all go together, honestly, the solution, and this is really hard for a lot of people to hear, but
is life disposable?
yes.
So Advocacy for Children is a very broad title. Jim always calls me Vice President of Life. I'm like, oh, I like that. Can we change the name? And so a lot of what we do is working with pregnancy centers across the U.S. There's 2,800 pregnancy centers, and we want them really equipped to reach abortion-minded and abortion-vulnerable women, especially in this kind of culture, in this environment where abortion has now become a right. This is a woman's right. This is reproductive health. This is healthcare. Makes me incredibly angry. So that's what we come in every day talking about. How do we equip pregnancy centers? Because they're on the front lines. We are not. But how do we equip them to really have those hard conversations about what does it mean to choose life? And so one of the things we're hearing is designer babies. Designer babies. Well, I don't want a child with a disability. I don't want a boy. I want. And so even listening to women say, I want, talks about the selfishness. And that's where you come in with them before us. How would you talk to a woman in that situation who says, I can't because I want to finish my college. I can't because I have this career. I want something different, where it becomes a very selfish motivation for that abortion. What would you say to a young woman in that situation?
Okay, I'm going to zoom out because you have actually framed this exactly right. And that is making the comparison between the pitch from the baby taking industry of abortion and the pitch from the baby making industry of IVF, because these are actually two sides of the same child commodifying coin. Okay, so what abortion says is if a child is unwanted, maybe they have a diagnosis, maybe they're getting in the way of your career, maybe you're genuinely afraid of, some kind of circumstance in your life. If they're unwanted, you can violate their right to life and force them out of existence. What the baby making world of IVF says, if the child is very wanted, you can force them into existence, and they might lose their mother or father in the process. And the reality is many children will probably also lose their life in the process. Because what we're seeing, when you're doing sidewalk counseling or when you're pregnancy centers, when you've got somebody there counseling a woman who's trying to figure out, what should I do with this child that I wasn't planning on? Typically, about how many kids' lives are at stake in that conversation? I'm asking you, how many
At a pregnancy center?
when they're talking to a woman, how many children's lives are at stake?
We see about 250,000 conversations a year, and those conversations are life or death.
But for the one woman, you're generally trying to convince her to save one life, to keep the life of one child.
Right.
In the world of IVF, oftentimes that one woman has 10 children or 15 children or 20 children. And now you're trying to convince her, hey, you know what? Those children have a right to life too. But they're not in her womb yet. They're in a petri dish. They're in a freezer. And the reason why she has 10, 15, or 20 is because her doctor told her to make that much.
Right.
They said, you're going to need to make as many embryos as possible. Why? Because you need to get the kid you want. And you might want a girl, or you might not want a child that has an increased risk of developing early baldness or something. You want a child with blue eyes. I mean, we actually have the technology now to completely screen the entire genome of the child and eradicate the ones that do not fit our idea of what the ideal baby should be.
Right.
So both of these things go together. Both of them see the child as an object of rights, not a subject of rights. And so that is why you have made the connection that honestly every Christian needs to make, which is children are humans, vulnerable humans with rights, whether they are unwanted or very wanted. And it is our job as adults to conform to the rights of children rather than requiring that children lose their life or their mother and father so we can have what we want. So we do need to look at it from both perspectives. So then what do you say to the woman that you're counseling? You're not going to be a mother. You're already a mother. The child already knows you. They already love you. And the justice in this situation requires that you do hard things for them and not the other way around.
Right. I don't know if you saw, it's probably been about 3 years ago, there's this huge headline, Iceland eradicates Down syndrome. They didn't eradicate Down syndrome. They aborted 100% of those in utero diagnoses.
They eradicated people.
Exactly. It's an entire generation of children that their lives were taken, but yet it was celebrated that we've eradicated. My fear in the United States is we're going down that path.
Yes.
To the designer, I want, and this goes into surrogacy.
Right.
You have a same-sex couple and they're choosing, I want blonde hair, blue eyes, and I want a girl. And then second time around, we want a boy. And how do we stop what feels like a very slippery slope?
Yes.
When in culture did we stop analyzing our own motivation to say, oh, wait, that's selfish, maybe borderline narcissistic?
Yes.
Instead of putting that child first. When did you see that start changing in our culture in the United States?
Okay. I think that there's 3 different streams that you have to address here. First one is cultural. So when did things culturally change? Probably the sexual revolution. Probably that is when we said we will exalt sexual identity, sexual desire, sexual fulfillment. We're going to put it at the status of God. It's going to be the top of our value hierarchy, if you want to kind of use Jordan Peterson's speak. Or it will become our idol, if you want to just name it in Old Testament.
Very much an idol.
Okay. So whatever is at the top of your hierarchy, everything's going to be sacrificed to that. So if the pinnacle of what you worship and what you value is adult sexual expression, adult sexual identity, adult sexual bonds, children will be the necessary sacrifice for that. So that mentality began in the sexual revolution in the 60s. So the other sphere is technologically. Technologically, this began when we realized we could make babies in a petri dish.
Right.
Once you can take procreation out of the marital embrace and you can govern it by a technician, now you can very easily genetically screen those children before they're even implanted. Now you can swap and trade gametes, purchased on the open market. Now you don't have to put the child back into the mother's womb. You can put it into any womb. So technologically, that's where it began. And then legally, it began with no-fault divorce, right? No-fault divorce was the legal beginning of that slippery slope where we said this institution, this sun in the cosmos of marriage and family, our understanding of marriage and family, it's no longer an institution centered around the well-being of children. It's now a vehicle of adult fulfillment. Now marriage is really about you being happy. And if you, heterosexual, mom and dad, are unhappy, it can cease being a marriage. And so I would say cultural, law, and technology have all worked together. And the result is children are commodified. Children are now being designed, sold, trafficked, denied their mother and father. And honestly, more children are destroyed now that we have these new improved technologies. I mean, Iceland, all of the new genome screening is looking at Iceland and going, hold my beer.
Right.
We can do better than that.
Yeah. We can pick and choose. You hit on something that we talked a little bit about yesterday in our team meeting. Trafficking, I think, in the culture right now, you think about children who are already here, children who are being trafficked, women, young boys coming in from Eastern European countries. That has been a kind of a conversation that has, I think, riled us up a little bit. It's happening right here in the United States. The sex trafficking, the bringing women in across state lines, but no one talks about the buying and selling of eggs, of sperm, and no one uses the term trafficking.
Yes.
And now we even talked about, there's a case where a pedophile was allowed to have a surrogate baby.
Many such cases, unfortunately, Robyn, many such cases.
How do we as the pro-life community, and pro-life sometimes will have a very negative connotation because we're always accused of only caring about the baby. We're like, no, we're talking about the mom and the dad. Dad has a voice in this.
That's right.
But how do we as the Big C Church, or even Christians in a kind of a legislative realm, How do we talk about that to get people to understand you are buying and selling children? That is a form of trafficking. And no one wants to talk about that.
Clarity, courage.
Mm.
You need to take the kind of clarity and courage that you have on pro-life issues. The clarity of knowing that that is a life from the moment of conception that deserves protection. The courage to say it even if it offends people.
Mm.
You take that into the world of reproductive technologies. Clarity. Children have a right to life from the moment of conception. They have a right to their mother and father. Courage. That means that some adults are not going to get what they want. That means that sometimes the answer might be no. No. You don't necessarily get to rent the womb of a woman. You don't necessarily get to solve your infertility by purchasing an egg from an anonymous donor. You don't get to go down to the sperm bank and become a mother at the age of 41 because you have not found Mr. Right. You know, these kinds of why does it take courage? Because we're not talking about the gays. We're talking about everyone. If these things are true, single, married, gay, straight, fertile, and infertile, all have to conform to the rights of children. And that takes courage.
Yeah.
Because that means sometimes we will have to have uncomfortable conversations with people that we love. Sometimes the answer to what we want is going to be no. But that is what child protection requires. And if you don't say no, you will have pedophiles buying and selling children. We do have pedophiles buying and selling children. And let me just explain why we have that. There are, from a child protective standpoint, two legitimate pathways to acquire an infant, let's say. One is biologically. You give birth to a child, and the pre-political recognition is that baby belongs to you, and you belong to that baby. That is a concept that is so deeply entrenched, not just in natural law, but common law, that it has been almost unassailable until recently. The other legitimate pathway to take home a vulnerable infant from the hospital is adoption. If you want to take a vulnerable child home from the hospital, you can't just say, I intend to parent that baby. You actually have to have somebody screen you, vet you, do background checks, home studies, references, right? I'm an adoptive mom. So are a lot of the people listening to this. It was a lot harder than simply saying, I intend to parent this baby, give me the baby. Social workers aren't idiots. We've got decades of best practice around making sure that as much as possible, we ensure that children go home with adults who will love them as if they had been born to them.
Right.
But in the world of reproductive technologies, biology doesn't matter, and adoption requirements are non-existent. They've created new pathways for parenthood that bypass adoption and biology. Now you have intent-based parenthood. We are going state by state, something called the Uniform Parentage Act, and they are redefining parenthood. So you can assemble sperm, egg, and womb, and you can take home a child unrelated to you with no adoption screening, and you have all of the parental rights to that kid that the person who gave birth to the child has to that kid.
Right.
What that is state-sanctioned child trafficking. That's what it is. And it is being pushed, adopted, and passed in the name of adult equality and progress. So these are issues where the church has got to get with it. We have to get with it. Very real children are at stake. And we are reordering the universe of marriage and family laws to serve adults.
You brought up something, so I know I was joking with you earlier, so I was going to ask hard questions. This is probably a hard question. Do you ever, when you're talking about this and you're so passionate, you cannot deny the passion and we agree with it. But you said in the Jordan Peterson interview, I'm not anti-adoption. And you just brought up adoption again. Do you ever have someone say, well, Katy, isn't that hypocritical? You're saying that this child needs this and this and this, but you're an adoptive mom. How do you reconcile that with people and talk? You said something that was so just, I don't know, it hit me. I think because of what we do, Focus on the Family, we're advocating for children every day. And you said something about, I cannot compensate for what his birth mom.
Yes.
And then you said, but there's also an opportunity for adoption agencies to be trained better. Flesh that out for me a little bit.
So right now, adoption is better. There was a time where adoption agencies, and I think the pro-life world too that would say adoption fixes everything. It might even be better for a child to be adopted by unrelated adults than stay with a young unmarried birth mother. That's not necessarily the message. I mean, some young unmarried birth mothers may choose an adoption plan,
Mm-hmm.
but the solution to an unplanned pregnancy isn't adoption. It's parenting.
Mm.
That's the solution to an unplanned pregnancy. Ideally, both mother and father parent the child. Mother and father commit to one another and to the child. So the child doesn't lose their life or their mother and father.
Right.
Sometimes that's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then adoption is what a good friend of mine calls divine plan B.
Mm.
But we can't pretend like it doesn't begin with loss.
Right.
Not for the mother and not for the child. And we can look at outcomes for children who have been adopted. They are raised by adults who are better educated, wealthier, in more stable marriages, and who statistically spend more time with their adopted children than the average biological family.
Mm.
But adopted children, even if they're adopted at birth, still disproportionately struggle. In school, with externalizing disorders, many of them would report feeling challenges in terms of trust and attachment. That is because you can't fully compensate for everything that your child has lost. That's not because there's something wrong with the mother and father that adopted them, and there's nothing wrong with the child. It's that children belong to their mothers and their fathers. And very often there is a lifelong deficit that goes along with that.
Right.
Now, you can and should make a very clear distinction between adoption that seeks to mend the wound of what the child has lost,
Right.
and reproductive technologies that inflicts the wound
Right.
on purpose. From a child-centric perspective, these two things are completely different. In one, the adults are doing hard things for the child, and in the other, the child is doing hard things for adults.
We were talking yesterday, and I said, it's an interesting time in history. Roe versus Wade's been overturned June 2022. And we somehow have said this is empowerment for women. Abortion's empowerment for women. And we've said to the fathers, because like you said, you're already a mom, you're already a dad, but we've said to the men, you don't have a voice in this conversation. My body, my choice. That's the big thing. My body, my choice. So you're saying, well, this child, this woman in this unexpected pregnancy, dad's not even in the picture. He may have not even gone to, say they come into a pregnancy center. He's not there. She's coming in by herself, or she's typically with a girlfriend, not even a family member.
Right.
And so how do we reach the men to say, we really didn't mean that you didn't have a voice? So now we're going to backtrack 20 years. How do you then reach a dad? Because we've said you don't matter.
Yeah. Probably the answer is Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Christ and his people, Christ and his message, Christ and his church, Christ and his ethos. And what I mean by that is we actually are seeing a massive culture shift among young men, among Gen Z men. We are seeing, for the first time, young men outnumbering young women in terms of church attendance.
Wow.
We are seeing young men embracing traditional gender roles more than women are. We are seeing men swing towards conservative values, whereas young women, Gen Z women, are swinging more towards progressive values. So we actually are reaching young men in a lot of ways. Maybe not every young man, but we do have a huge cohort of young men right now who are returning to church, rejecting porn, rejecting hookups, and who want to get married statistically more than young women do, which I believe is a phenomenon that we haven't seen in the history of humanity. What is going on is, and part of it is a story of there's good things happening among young men, and part of it is a story of absolute ideological capture of young women. So we are at a challenging place, but there is hope, I think, in terms of what is happening with young men. Why is it that men are returning to that more sane, biologically anchored perspective? It is because there's been an increase in voices that are telling them what real manhood is.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's not largely from the church. It's from political influencers. It's from Charlie Kirk. It's from Ben Shapiro.
Right.
It's from Matt Walsh. It's from Jordan Peterson. And they're the ones that are saying this is what real masculinity is. Why are young men listening to them? Because the rest of the culture demonizes them.
Right.
The rest of the culture says there's nothing good about men. Anything that comes naturally to you is toxic. There's nothing that you can add to society that a woman can't do better. You're completely optional. You're optional in church. You're optional in the family. You're optional in society. You make things worse. You're oppressors. So the one place where young men have heard something different is in these conservative voices. And now they're returning to church because of it. So this is an opportunity for the church.
Big C church to step in.
Big C church. The influencers have gotten the young men part of the way. The church now needs to get them all of the way.
So that brings a lot of what we do. A lot of what we do in my department is B2B, directly to a pregnancy center. Would you champion pregnancy centers having fatherhood programs?
Heck,
Because we
yes.
have pregnancy centers that don't.
Yes.
It's no, we just want to love on the mom. You come in. We're just gonna, which is wonderful in and of itself. But challenge our pregnancy centers to step into that.
You tell me, what are the statistics on a woman who chooses to keep her baby if she has the support of the baby's father?
9 out of 10.
Yes. Get them in. Go get them in. And a lot of it is just telling it, you can do this. And giving them, I'd say even more than you can do this, but give them the relationships so they can do it.
Right. One of the things that you mentioned something about the hookup society. That has taken away the intimacy that was God's design. And somehow we've just really disrespected the intimacy and the sexual part of a marriage. And it's interesting to hear you say men are coming back. They don't want that. How do we reach that young woman who says, no, I have the right to do this. So I'm now empowered to do this. And you're like, no, this is something that should be reserved. This is something that should be protected when culture is saying something completely different.
So here's a truth for all different spheres, but it's very true here. You will become what you behold. So the one way that you reach young women is for those young women to have a mother that they behold, who knows how to cherish and steward her body and her sexuality and her femininity. But if they don't, those women need to behold someone. Who are they going to behold? What women are they going to follow?
Right.
I mean, I just listed 5 guy influencers, and there's, I'd say like 20, that I think, man, you guys are just nailing it. Like, I can think of maybe 3 female influencers that are telling women the truth about their bodies,
Right.
About marriage, about the goodness of children, about genuine chastity.
Right.
But I can go on Instagram and I can find hundreds of accounts of women who are talking about high body counts as empowerment. I can find dozens of paid female influencers who are telling women to leave their perfectly good husbands because he doesn't do half the housework, and there's some guy that really gets her that's out there waiting to be discovered, and you gotta you be you. I mean, there are so many voices that are leading women astray. And so if we want women to become someone who cherishes their body, understands that sex, marriage, and babies all go together, and that it is good for you,
Right.
that true beauty means self-governance, they have to behold women that are doing that. So honestly, the solution, and this is really hard for a lot of people to hear, but women who are doing it well, not doing it perfectly, but doing it well, stewarding their bodies, loving their husbands, cherishing their children, parenting them well, you've got to start influencing the women around you. Whether that is purposefully taking on girls, women, teens in your neighborhood, in your church, you definitely need to train up your own children, but you probably need to reveal the goodness of your life in whatever social media that you're on. Maybe you're just on Facebook. Maybe you're on Instagram. Do it more. I just would encourage you to do it more. Talk about how wonderful it is to be at home with your children. Talk about how appreciative you are to have a husband who protects and provides for you.
Right.
Like extol the goodness of a life of sexual integrity so that young women have somebody to become.
Right.
So I think that that's a little out of the comfort zone for a lot of Christians,
Right.
especially ones that didn't grow up in the social media age. But that is where the young eyes are. Give them something beautiful to behold.
And then going back to surrogacy, IVF. What do you say to the couple who, and I have a personal opinion, but I won't cloud the conversation. or the Christian couple.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying, we have tried for 7 years to do all the natural things, and
Yeah.
we, our heart's desire is, to have a baby. God said,
Yeah.
I made women to do this. I
Yeah.
made, go forth and multiply, kind of thing. And they say, what if we find a pro-life doc, a Christian doc, and he doesn't believe in retrieving dozens of eggs? Is that morally acceptable? Is that biblically acceptable
Mhm.
for this Christian couple who I've heard couples say we feel like God's calling us to grow our family, or
Sure.
God's calling. How do you speak to that?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know, for me, it's very easy when you're talking about a same-sex couple and designer babies and selective reduction, and people don't even understand what that means. Like, you've just implanted 6 babies, and so, oh, all 6 took. Now you're going to have 6 no, no, we're going to selectively.
Really?
That's abortion.
Right. It's abortion.
That's taking the life of a child. So I get that, but the IVF side, that just feels like a muddy kind of conversation,
Mm-hmm.
a hard conversation.
So let's just talk about the Christian heterosexual couple that is not using somebody else's sperm or egg. They're going to use their own, which, by the way, that may not be possible. If it has not worked and you're now 42, there's a real good chance that you as a woman are not going to be able to use your own eggs. Your eggs are old. One of the big things that we need to do in this space is tell women the truth about their bodies. And that is that it is hard to get pregnant after 35.
Mm.
And the world has told women you have all the time in the world. Do your career, get your master's degree, pay off your debt, travel the world, discover yourself. I'm sorry, your body generally will not cooperate with a delayed timeline for marriage and family. So first we need to tell women the truth. Use your 20s to get married and have babies because you're going to want it. And if you want it when you're 46, that may not end well.
Right.
You, right? But let's just say that it's the Christian heterosexual couple using their own sperm and egg. And they say, we are pro-life. We don't want to destroy any embryos. Well, number one, you won't find a doctor that's going to help you with that. And I'll tell you why. Help you with that. What do I mean by that?
Mhm.
I mean, they're not going to encourage you to create 10 embryos and then genetically screen them and then freeze some of them and discard the ones that are chromosomally abnormal. You won't find a doctor to do that, and I'll tell you why. Because the world of big fertility operates virtually regulation-free.
Mm.
We don't know how many babies they create every year. We don't know how many are in frozen storage. We don't know how many get donated to research. They don't have to tell us any of that. The only thing that fertility clinics have to tell us is their live birth rate,
Mm.
how
Mhm.
successful they are when they do implant a child, and how often that child is born alive. So you know what will tank that rate? And then they compete against each other. Who has the best live birth rate? You know what is going to drop their live birth rate? If you use an embryo that's chromosomally unfit, or you implant a C-grade embryo instead of an A-grade embryo. And so your doctor will advise you against that because it's bad for him. It's
Mhm.
bad for the clinic.
Yeah.
He wants you to make 15 embryos. He wants you to screen out the undesirables. He wants you to grade them A, B, C, and D. He wants you to only use A and B embryos. Freeze C and D for later. And the reality is that if you really are pro-life, no child goes into a freezer, ever. No embryo goes into a freezer. We know that when children go into a freezer, they very likely will never come out again. That's why we have somewhere between 1 million and who knows, 10 million is an upper range I've heard of children in frozen orphanages in this country today. So if you're going to do this in a pro-life way, you have to find a doctor that agrees not to eliminate any embryos. You won't.
Right.
You have to agree not to freeze any embryos. You're not going to genetically screen any embryos. You're not going to determine which ones you implant based on whether they're male or female. So what does that mean? That means that every single round of IVF you do, you create only those number of children that you're going to immediately implant. 1, 2, maybe 3. 3 is incredibly risky because, like you said, you put 3 in. What if all of them take? You have triplets. But you're a 45-year-old woman. IVF is risky. Multiples are risky. You were a geriatric pregnancy when you were over 35. They're going to tell you you'll die, selectively reduce. Okay, so you're going to create instead 1 or 2 embryos, and then you're going to implant them. So that costs anywhere from $12,000 to $25,000 per round. If you're in the late 30s, early 40s, you're probably going to have to go through at least 3 rounds to get a live baby.
Right.
So here's the answer. you don't have the money to do this in a way that's pro-life.
Mm.
That's why everybody creates embryos and freezes them. Then they only have to pay for the transfer,
Right.
not the creation of, it's so much cheaper to make 12 embryos at a time than 2, and then another 2, and then another 2.
We've cheapened life.
So I've spoken to thousands of people at conferences. I'm not just talking about podcasts. I'm talking live events at conferences. And everybody asks this question because we all know and we love the heterosexual couples in our life that would be
And your heart
parents.
breaks.
He
Yes.
wants them to be parents. And everybody wants to know, can you do this in a way that's pro-life? And I say, you don't have the money and you won't find the doctor. And I've had 5 people come up and say, I did do it. We did it. Most of them froze embryos, but they said we did go back and get all 5 at some point, or we tried with all 5 and they didn't make it. And I'm like, how much money do you have? How much money do you make? And they're like, we have lots of money. Ordinary people can't do this.
Right. So if we're talking about frozen embryos, frozen babies, adopting those, what do you feel about that? I mean, there are organizations that do snowflake adoptions.
Right.
Is that the next best thing? Is that a divine plan B to adopt those frozen babies?
Maybe.
Okay.
So when you look at an unplanned pregnancy, the solution is not adoption. The solution is parenting. You made the baby. You raised the baby. Your decisions brought that child into the world. The child should not lose their right to life or their right to their mother and father because they were unplanned. That is your responsibility. You raised the baby. What about the very planned children of IVF in frozen storage? The answer is not adoption. It's the same answer you give to the woman in the crisis pregnancy center. You made the baby. You raised the baby. The answer is not adoption. The answer is parent the children that you made, even if you have to buy an embarrassingly large van or take out a loan or your mother moves in to help. Right? Those children should not lose their right to life or their mother or father because you overplanned. Now, unfortunately, because we have so many children in frozen storage who have been there sometimes for decades, their parents are dead. Or 20 to 40% by some accounts have been abandoned. Nobody's paying the storage fee. They don't even have contact with the parents anymore. In those cases, you might say adoption is justified here. But here we need to make a distinction because clinics treat those, and actually the law treats those children as property. There's no way to categorize those little beings except as property. So they can trade and swap and distribute those embryos. So we don't do that. If you are going to seek to, out of a pro-life conviction, bring those children into your home, it has to be adoption. It has to be undergoing the exact same level of rigor and screening as traditional adoptive parents. And in that case, that's probably the only child-honoring option, but it will never be a solution for the millions of children on ice, especially when we keep producing and storing hundreds of thousands a year.
Every year. Let's go into foster care because that's the other hat I wear. Come in every day. We are advocating for children. And I always say there's no bad kids in that situation. The kids have been removed because mom and dad are not safe or mom and dad are not making good decisions.
Right.
So child's been removed. Unfortunately, it's typically very traumatic. They're removed from everything that's known, even if it's trauma. It's known trauma. You're putting them into an unknown situation that adds a whole different level of trauma. And we always say reunification is the goal. Who's helping mom and dad become that safe, stable, you can't say conflict-free. We always have conflict, but at least healthy conflict within that marriage. Who's helping that mom and dad to say, work hard. Get your children back. And let the church, who comes alongside mom and dad.
Okay. So this, I should have an answer right off the top of my head, but we have been coordinating with a couple organizations that really work to do that. And I can get their names later. It's like not right in front of me right now, but that is what they do. They're like, a lot of times children are removed not because of these sort of egregious examples of abuse, but because they have no other relationships, right? They don't have any other relationships in their world because they have to go into the hospital for a procedure and they don't have any, so they go into foster care,
Right.
or there's all of these sort of more temporary situations where if they had relationships, we
Mm-hmm.
could avoid the children going into the foster care churn,
Right.
unfortunately. And there are times where children need to be removed from their home.
Mm-hmm.
There are times where the church and Christians need to step in. When we talk about doing hard things, it's not just unplanned pregnancies. It's not just figuring out a divorce situation where
Right.
you would rather escape than work it through.
Mm.
It is also healthy marriages that say we will choose to take on a child in a situation that is burdened for the sake of the child,
Mhm.
even though it means we're going to do the hard thing, right? That is also a way to put kids first, put them before us. But there's so many ways that we can support parents in those precarious situations before they get to the point where the child needs to be removed.
Right.
And the answer is ultimately relationships.
Mhm.
It's not money.
Right.
It's relationships. How can we increase the number of relationships that they have that are trustworthy and healthy? And honestly, somebody that they can behold so they know what kind of parents they can become.
Can be. Mhm.
And honestly, like if you could design an institution like the church, that's exactly what these people would need.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, let's take that a little bit further. I'm a living example of it didn't work. My grandkids were removed from the home 6 weeks, 3 years, 4 years. So I now have a toddler and a newborn in my house literally within 15 minutes. And that was the phone call from my husband. I'm at the house. DHS is here. We have 15 minutes to decide. Do we want our grandkids or do you want them to go into foster care? Well, I didn't need 15 minutes to say, yes, I want my grandchildren. And we walked that journey with the with that goal and the hope, this burning hope to say, we want mom and dad. Sorry, Kate. We want mom and dad to be healthy. I want my kids, my grandkids to be with mom and dad. It didn't work. They were addicts for 17 years. And so we moved forward with going through, getting permanent guardianship and getting, the kinship adoption. And that happens more often than not. More often than we ever want to see. There's almost 400,000 children in out of home care right now. You have almost 100,000 that didn't have grandparents, didn't have extended family. And now we're saying, hey, mom, dad, stable mom, dad, Christians, church, there are children that desperately need a forever family. Sorry. There are children that languish in homes that maybe are unsafe.
Right.
And we're saying to these Christian couples, what's God asking you to do? Because that child needs a forever family, not because you need a kid. Are you willing to step into a really hard space?
I think this is where we need to get adoption right.
Mm.
And sometimes we don't. What is adoption? Adoption is a just society's response to children who have lost their parents. It is not a delivery system of kids for adults.
Exactly.
This is not a way to solve your infertility. This is not a way for same-sex couples to become parents. The adults may not get everything they want in the process, but the children will get what they need.
Right.
We have to be very clear about adoption. Who is it for? It's not for the adults. It's for the kids.
Right.
If adoption is done right, every child that needs a loving home is going to find one, but not every adult who wants a kid is going to get one.
Right. Nor should they.
Nor should they. Nor should they. So that's how we need to think about it. This child, and again, understanding the loss at the beginning of adoption actually sets the stage for understanding how we need to enter into that adoption on behalf of the child. We're not going in so the child can meet our need. We're going into this so we can meet their
Right.
need. And that does mean that you, the adults, will be burdened. But the only alternative is the child is burdened. So choose your burden. I think it should be on the shoulders of the adults, not the kids.
Agreed. It was interesting. My granddaughter's now 24, grandson's 23. And I remember.
Girl, you look good. I just mean like from an age perspective.
Can you please leave that in there? Okay.
No,
Good.
I mean like you got a 24-year-old
Granddaughter. Yeah.
daughter.
They were 19. They were 19 when they were both babies were.
Whoever did the makeup, probably not even the makeup. Yeah.
Thank you. Good genes. But now I
Ooh,
remember.
you can't say that
Yeah.
these days. We got some Sydney Sweeney
Oh God.
vibes going on here.
I should have worn jeans today, and so I have good jeans.
There you
Yeah,
go.
there we go. Now I remember, and her name is Taylor, and she wouldn't mind me sharing this. We've had these conversations. She knows I talk about this all the time, And I remember her saying, "I just need to know, did my mom not want me?" And, and as a Grammy, I'm like, "But I've done everything right. I've loved you, and I've" fill in the blanks, of all these things. I let her join Girl Scouts, and we took horseback riding, and I spent hours and hours and hours, still do, loving on her, teaching her to cook, all these things. And then you hear that, and it kind of pierces your heart a little bit because you think, "I've done everything right." But going into scripture and looking at God's design for the family, God made her to want to be with
Right.
mom, want to be with dad. How do you say that to a couple who did step into a really hard spot and you're adopting a child from foster care? There's trauma. I don't care if it was one time or 100 times. There is trauma in that child's psyche when they're removed
Hmm.
from a mom and dad. And sometimes we have couples that say, "It sounds like you're trying to talk me out of this." We're not trying to talk you out of this. We're trying to equip you to understand this is very different.
That's right.
So what do you say to a couple that feels like, "Gosh, I thought we did everything right?"
You can do everything right, and it will be redemptive, and it will be beautiful.
Mhm.
And that child will still want to know, who is my mother? Who is my father? Why
Mhm.
aren't I being raised by them?
Yeah.
And that is true in the world of adoption, where a lot of times the answer is because of tragedy.
Mhm.
And I'm so sorry because you deserved to have that man and woman loving you.
Right.
And that hole that you feel, it's not because there's something wrong with you. There's something right with you. This is
Mhm.
how all human children feel. And in the world of big fertility, we're now manufacturing and commercializing that loss. And we're telling those kids, hey, love makes a family,
Right.
right? Your biology doesn't matter. Why do you want a dad? You have two moms.
Yeah.
Or you have a mother and a father. Why aren't we enough for you?
Mm.
And they're like, well, because I want to know my biological father,
Mhm.
and it's not because there's something wrong with those kids. They're human kids.
Right.
These are the questions that every human asks. The
Mhm.
chairman of my board, he has had dozens of foster kids in his
Mm.
home. Many of them removed from rough situations, some who never knew their parents.
Mm.
They didn't all ask about their father. 100% of them said, "Who is my mother?
Mm.
And why doesn't she want me?"
Right.
All of them. So this is not some kind of social construction. Mothers and fathers are not some kind of oppressive structure of the patriarchy.
Right.
Okay. These are things that every human child longs for,
Mhm.
benefits from, and has a right to. And if we choose to normalize structures where they lose one or both, woe to us.
Yeah.
If we seek to redeem the times where they've lost one or both, then to God be the glory.
Katie, I mentioned earlier the term pro-life sometimes comes with big emotions. Um, and again, we're talking about the abortion debate is it's the healthcare woman. It's your right. Um, is life a natural right? Is life um, disposable?
Hmm. Yes. And I run a nonprofit called Them Before Us, and we believe that children have a right to life. We also believe children have a right to their mother and father. I call myself a children's rights activist. And that sometimes comes with the necessity for a bit of education. Because these days, when we say right, it kind of means whatever an adult really, really, really wants. Right. So some people think they have a right to choose, or a right to marry, or a right to government funded birth control, or a right to testosterone from Planned Parenthood without your parents knowing about it. So just because you call it a right, just because you really want something, that doesn't make it a right. So there actually is a system of understanding natural rights, and it's called natural law. It's the way of understanding what we ought to do based on looking at the natural world. And so this is the kind of philosophy that undergirds our entire system of governance, right? When the founders talked about the Bill of Rights, they're talking about something that exists pre government, not something that the government provides for you, or that a supplier provides to you, or a technician gives to you.
Right.
These are fundamental natural rights. This is the same basis on which Martin Luther King Jr. appealed for equality for our Black brothers and sisters, even though our civil laws didn't recognize that natural
Mhm.
right. So, do children have a right to life? I will just give you like my co-author Stacey Manning and I, when we wrote our first book, Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement, we said, look, we understand there's a lot of confusion about rights. We're not natural lawyers. We're not Robert George. We're not John Finnis. I mean, like, we're not these thought leaders. We're just two moms trying to defend kids.
Right.
So we created this sort of grid to understand whether or not something is or is not a natural right. And I'll tell you what it is. Little cheat sheet. Number one, it's a natural right if it exists pre-government. Okay, so the government doesn't give it to you. Nobody provides it for you. It exists pre-government. Okay, so your life, the ability to live, humans' life existed before 1776.
Right.
Right? Even before, the Roman Empire.
Yes, there's the early church.
Early church.
Mhm.
Okay, right. So our right to life existed pre-government. That we come from a man and woman, pre-government. Whether it's like Team Adam and Eve or Team Homo erectus, pre-government. You come from a man and woman, okay?
Right.
Number two, everyone gets it in equal distribution. So if it can vary in degrees, like a GED versus a PhD, it's not a natural right. If it's dorm room versus Mar-a-Lago, it's not a natural right. If everybody has the same amount naturally, like the ability to speak or the ability to defend themselves, natural right. How many life do you have, Robyn?
One.
Yes. How many parents do you have?
Yeah.
Two. You have two. Same with me.
Yeah. Imagine that.
Equal distribution.
Right.
Okay. So the third criteria is nobody has to provide it for you. So if you have to lay a foundation, sheetrock it, put a roof on it, it's not a natural right. If you have to you go in to a doctor and have them cut you out and fix your appendix, it's not a natural right. Even you can need something to live, but it's not necessarily a natural right.
right.
A lot of those are commodities that are important, but not a natural right. Nobody needs to provide it for you. So you can look at a right to life, and you can look at your right to your mother and father. If you exist, those two things exist. Nobody provides it for you. So in the world of thinking through all of these rights claims, that's a really helpful framework. Did it exist pre-government? Does everyone get it in equal distribution? And does anybody have to deliver it to you in a package outside your front door? It's not a natural right. So yes, children have a right to life. And they have other rights too.
Agreed.
Secondarily, their right to be known and loved by the two people responsible for their existence.
Our goal is to always have a conversation, not vitriolic. And I like the conversations where they don't agree with me because I get an opportunity. I want to listen to them, but then I'm going to ask the same of them, respect where I'm coming from. But people say, I don't want to be an activist because you said I'm a child
Totally am.
activist. I think that might be a big call on your life, pretty sure. But then you have people that say, well, I just want to advocate. Tell me the difference.
You can.
And tell me how we talk to not just the Big C church, but to people in our everyday lives. This is what it means to advocate for a child. This is what it means to push back as an activist. What's your differentiation?
Well, let me put it in terms that might sound a little more accessible and comfortable. You don't have to be an activist. I don't know if you have to be an advocate. You have to be a defender. You have to be a defender. And that's not me talking about it. That is scripture. That is the Bible in Psalm 82 saying, you must defend the weak and needy. You have to speak up for the vulnerable. Give justice to the fatherless. This is not a Katy mandate. This is a Christ mandate. This is a God mandate. There are 37 references to defending the fatherless, protecting the fatherless in the Old Testament alone. And so you, as a Christian, your manifestation of your pure and undefiled religion before God has always been connected to caring for the defenseless, specifically children. And I will tell you, as you look through the pantheon of church history, in different continents, in different cultures, in different centuries, there is something that all of those Christians have in common. They confront adults, so children are protected. Whether you are talking about starting orphanages in pretty much every country of the world, whether you're talking about confronting infanticide in the variety of different ways that has been practiced throughout the centuries, whether you are challenging female genital mutilation in Islamic countries, whether you are Amy Carmichael and you are running into the temples and grabbing those sexual slaves and saying, don't touch these kids, I'm going to raise them myself. Every Christian throughout history in every country they go to protects kids. it is kind of one of the fundamental expressions of Christianity. So you don't actually get to choose.
Mm.
If you are Christian, you don't get to choose whether you do
Right.
this.
It's a command.
It is a command. So how do you do it? And I would say you can and should have a high degree of empathy with adults who are struggling.
Mhm.
You should be the shoulder on which your friend cries when she gets that pregnancy test and she feels like she is not ready for a baby. You, in my opinion, should be the safest space. You should initiate relationship with your friends who experience same-sex attraction or who identify as LGBTQ. You should be the place where your friend can pour out all of her troubles when her marriage is struggling. Like high empathy for adults. You should be the person sacrificing and loving them.
Right.
And then you draw the line in the sand. And you say no amount of your longing or loss or struggle justifies victimizing children.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.